Hello again everyone from Tokyo, Japan, and welcome back to Japan Vintage Camera. Akemashita omedetou gozaimasu, kotoshi yoroshiku onegaishimasu. What that means is Happy New Year, and this year I'll be at your service. That's what yoroshiku onegaishimasu means, and you often hear Japanese say that after they introduce themselves for work or business or pleasure or whatever. And if they're more polite, they'll say yoroshiku onegai itashimasu. And if you're in Japan and you use that expression when you're meeting or introducing yourself to someone, they'll always go, "Oh, Nihongo jouzu desu ne," which means, "Oh, your Japanese is very good." Don't be too flattered when they say that, because no matter how badly you say something in Japanese, they always go, "Oh, jouzu." So, in reality, my Japanese is not very good, despite how long I've lived here, but I think it gets a little better every year. And hopefully, after I'm here for another 20 years, I'll be able to get by in Japanese. But anyway, this is my first video of the year, and since it's the first video of the year, I thought that I would review an especially interesting camera, one worthy of being my first review of the year. And what I'm going to be talking about today is this cool camera here. This is the Contax I. Back when it was made, it wasn't called the Contax I, it was just called the Contax because there wasn't any 2, 3, or later versions of it. And this was a quite sophisticated camera, probably the most sophisticated camera of its day, way back in 1932. The Contax, the original Contax, was produced from 1932 to 1936, and they all more or less look like this, kind of a black brick with knobs and buttons on it with a lens on the front. I commented in my previous video about the Contax II, saying that the Contax I was shaped like a brick, and it took photographs about as well as a brick, because very few of these cameras actually work. And that was a big issue with Contax back in the day. These cameras were brought out to compete with the Leica II, which had come out at that time, and which was selling very, it was very popular. It was a strong seller, and other companies, of course, wanted to get in on the new 35mm bandwagon. And Contax was the first one which made a really high quality, or I could say, superb quality camera to compete. And many people will say, especially in those days, that when it came to optics, and if you got one which actually worked, this was actually a superior camera to the Leica. Contax took a completely different approach. I guess in Germany of those days and other places, they took patents seriously. And so when Contax designed this camera, they copied nothing at all from the Leica. There's virtually no part in this camera can interchange, or later cameras are all kind of based on the focal plane shutter system of the Leica, the ones with horizontal shutters. At the end of the war, Germany and Japan lost all their patents, and so anyone is able to produce anything according to their old designs. But it's quite unique when you look at this camera and see that it has, the 180 or 270 or, whatever it is, a completely different approach to building a camera. And it worked. At least it somewhat worked. These weren't especially reliable cameras. And though professional photographers actually preferred them to the Leica camera, the Carl Zeiss lenses were really phenomenal. All the time that, during the years that they were made, they were always very highly regarded. But these cameras often had reliability issues. And during the 4 years that they were produced, there were about 6 different variations. And if I'm not mistaken, this one here is an example of the 5th variation, like A, B, C, D, E, and F. I think this is a D version, something like that. But whatever it is, very much like you would expect from a Contax I. When I got this camera, it didn't work. So I found this camera for sale here in Japan, really cheap, sold as what they call janku, which means junk. And it wasn't super cheap. On the other hand, it was much less expensive than what these cameras usually go for, working or not working. So on a whim, I picked it up just because I was curious, and also because I thought that maybe it would be something good to share here on my channel. And when I arrived, I wasn't surprised at all to find that nothing on it worked. The focus was stuck and wouldn't turn. The shutter didn't work. There was fungus and haze in the viewfinder and rangefinder system. And all in all, it wasn't a bad looking camera. They have kind of an interesting design to them, but it certainly wasn't a working camera. And I was kind of trying to figure out what I was going to do to this thing. Should I, should I try to fix it? Should I have someone else fix it? Or should I just sell it as is to someone who needs one for parts or whatever? And I ended up, just taking the plunge and just taking the camera apart, just out of curiosity to see what it looked like on the inside and if I could possibly fix it. And when I took apart the camera, and these aren't exactly easy cameras to take apart, but I did get it apart. And the first thing I noticed, it was all the oil and grease on the inside had dried into like glue. So I cleaned it all out with solvent and got the mechanisms more or less moving, the shutter, the focus helicoid going. The shutter I found had a broken shutter curtain ribbon. One of the ribbons had been replaced with the later style ribbon, which was made in like the, from the Contax II and later, and the other one was original and it was broken. So I happen to have some extra shutter curtain ribbon laying around, and just for giggles, I decided to attempt to replace it, and so I cut off the piece. I was kind of careful with the measurements, lining everything up, and put it together. And surprisingly, it worked. And not only did it worked remarkably well. I removed the prisms and stuff from the viewfinder, and I cleaned out the fungus and haze and all that, and luckily there was no damage in any other parts. And when I put it back together, it was nice and clear, and the rangefinder had nicely in adjustment, the shutter working well and accurately, and it turns out it's quite a good camera. And when you get one of these which work and you operate it, you can kind of see why professional photographers back in the day really liked these cameras. Now, I don't have the original lens for this camera. This is off of a Contax II, this particular one. You can kind of spot the earlier correct lenses because they usually have a black face around the inside. And if they don't have that, they at least have two screws on the front which hold on the front plate and aperture ring. This is the later, more improved version, but it fits on the camera. It looks well on it, so I just went ahead and stuck it on. And overall, it's an interesting camera. I really like the design. I like the way it's set up, the way it's laid out, and I think it's a perfectly good tool for taking pictures if you can find one which works. Just go ahead and take a look at the features, controls, and functions of the camera. We'll go ahead and start on the top here. And of course, we have the film rewind knob here, which is pretty consistent from the 1930s till the end of film. We have an accessory shoe here, which you can use for mounting a accessory viewfinder, and there were different finders made for these. There was the Albeta type finder, which was kind of a sports finder, which folded and unfolded, and of course there were the accessory finders, which you could use for other lenses. A number of lenses were produced for this camera over the years, and some wider angle lenses were made later on, the 28 and 21 millimeter lenses. And to use these lenses, of course, you need to attach a finder. Here we have the shutter release button, which accepts a standard cable release, and here we have the film counter dial. On the back of the camera, we have a viewfinder window and we have a rangefinder window, which varies depending on what year the camera was made. This being one of the later variations, the viewfinder window is, I believe, on the outside, and it's kind of tiny and squinty, but it's surprisingly bright and it works quite well. On the other side here, we have a lever which you use for helping to set reset the frame counter when you load film in the camera. On the bottom here, we have these switches here which you turn, and just like the later Contaxes which I reviewed in previous videos, the film back comes off, and it makes loading the film very easy. And of course, it has a removable, excuse my fumbling there, take-up spool, and in that way it's kind of similar to the Leica cameras, but on the other hand it's very different. Then you can actually take off the film back, and you don't have to cut the film lead or leader in order to load film into the camera. This made this camera much easier to load film back in the day, and I think that's one of the reasons why professional photographers liked Contax. And on the bottom here we have a release lever which you turn in order to rewind the film. Now on the front of the camera we have the viewfinder and rangefinder windows. One thing about the Contax, they always have this really wide footprint for the rangefinder, which gives it more accurate focusing, which is especially nice if you're using the faster lenses like the f1.5 sonar. We have this kind of slide out thing here, and this is for the 85mm lens, and what this does, it's just a simple framing system which narrows the frame for the narrower field of view for the 85mm lens. And over here we have kind of the heart and soul of the camera. This is the film winding and shutter charging dial, as well as being the shutter speed selector. So all that is kind of worked in there, and of course you have the shutter speed button on top. And Contax recommends that you use your first finger for depressing the shutter button, and you use your middle finger for focusing, so you don't get a finger in the way of the rangefinder window here. And as you can see, it sounds good, it works. The tricky thing about these cameras is the setting of the shutter speed, because it has a kind of a dual range setup. There's a ring on the bottom with a set of different gear ranges, and each one has an indicator color which you line up with what looks like a slotted screw here. And there are two colors, there's white or red, and you have to choose. There are two settings here. On the shutter speed dial you would choose white or red depending which range you have here. And of course we have a range for the slower speeds and a range for the higher speeds, and I can tell that's the slower speed just because of the way that the winding mechanism makes that noise when I wind it up. It's a good system, and I think that it works better than kind of the split dial system used on other makers. But on the other hand, it's a little bit hard to see. The buttons can be a little bit hard to see when you are turning them, the indicators, and okay, there's one there. And that should get it working at the higher speeds, and then you can kind of see the shutter speeds lined up here, and that operates at the higher speeds. It's a little tricky to use, but with practice it's not so bad, and I find that it works well. And Contax was quite interesting in the way that they were able to combine the features of these things. One issue which you often have with the Leica and other cameras is that these, the knob on the top tends to move, the shutter speed selector knob. So if you're touching it or you're wearing gloves or something, it can affect the actuation of the shutter, whereas on the Contax that's not an issue. That's probably another reason why professional photographers like this design. Now this camera still has the bayonet mount, which was pioneered by Contax and carried on through the various Contax cameras, and then carried on into the 50s and 60s and even into the 2000s when Nikon were making their rangefinder cameras, and they used the same Contax style bayonet mount. And this allows you to remove and replace the lenses very quickly compared to the screw mount designs where you have to screw the lens all the way in. And some of the old cameras, it helps to kind of set them to infinity before you put in the lens. Otherwise, it messes up. It doesn't catch the roller right or whatever. Especially if you're using those old Russian Leica copy cameras. This camera here features the same, features an infinity lock. So the camera locks at infinity, and to start focusing, you just push down like that. You push down the infinity lock, and that allows you to focus the camera. You have a distance scale and a depth of field scale on the front of the camera here. And originally these are kind of a nice nickel plated. This one's a little bit tarnished because of the age of the camera. Quite easy to see and quite easy to use. And of course it has the dual bayonet system. There's an internal bayonet which these standard lenses have. And some of the other lenses, especially the Biogon lenses, have an external bayonet and they grab on the outside. So two different bayonet systems on a single camera. It's very clever, and I think it works quite well. Now, if you are, I'm not sure who I would recommend these cameras to. If you can get one which is in good condition, or you know someone who knows how to fix them, they're actually a cool camera for shooting. The lenses which came on these cameras, the old sonars and such like that, these are in tessars like this one. They are phenomenal lenses, and I think the best lens which I've ever used in the 50mm focal length is the 1.5 f1.5 sonar. As I mentioned in one of my previous videos, I shot a few rolls of film with that camera and that lens, and I sold the camera before developing the film, and when I got the film back and saw how wonderful the lens performed, I really regretted getting rid of the camera. So these cameras really have wonderful lenses, and they're capable of taking superb photos. If you want to shoot what is definitely a unique camera and what something that your neighbors and other people around the on your block don't have, this is a pretty good one. If you have the folding lens, it's quite a pocketable camera. You can put it in your coat pocket and simply pop it out like that and turn it and lock it into shape. The other lenses, of course, don't fold in like this one here. But yeah, it's really cool. I really like this camera, and I would really like to see like a brand new one which hasn't been used, because I kind of look at the back here at this painted surface, and I'm amazed at like the mirror-like quality of the paint. And looking at the inside of this camera and the bits and pieces, you can tell that they really set out to try to make a very high quality camera. I love the fit and finish, and I can only imagine what this camera looked like when its original owner took it out of the box. It had to be just a fantastic to look at, almost too nice to take photos with. I kind of say that about that 2005 Nikon SP, which is sitting in my closet. I actually bought that camera to use, and then I took it out of the box and took it out of the plastic and said it's just too pretty to use. Maybe I'll put it in the closet, and I can maybe sell it in the future toward my daughter's college fund or something like that. A friend of mine did that with cars, and unfortunately he sold them too soon. He would have, not only would have been able to pay for his 3 kids' education, he probably could have sent them all to Harvard for what for the cars he had. He had a Superbird, a Dodge Challenger TA, a 1970 Charger RT SE, a Hemi Cuda, and a bunch of other ones, back in the days when you could buy these things for very little. And in the case of the cameras, I think, there are some which are collectible like that, and which, the value will go up really high on. I'm not sure if the old Contax is one of those, but on the positive side, if you get one for a few $100s and it works, you'll certainly be able to sell it for at least what you paid for it. So, it's kind of like renting one for free. This particular camera, I plan to list it for sale in my store later this week, along with a few other interesting cameras which I acquired last month. So if you're interested in purchasing a original Contax I, I guess E or D model, or D or E model, the 5th variation, whatever it is, A, B, C, D, E. Okay, so yeah, my math is as bad as my spelling. This one, it's a good working camera, clean viewfinder, rangefinder, shutter works, the lens is clean. I'll include this beautiful Tessar lens, and this camera will take really great pictures. But anyway, I noticed that the battery on my camera is starting to get low, not this camera, but the one I'm shooting the video with, so I'm going to go ahead and end it now. I've got some more interesting cameras that I plan to be reviewing in the future, so if you'd like to see those, please subscribe. If you like the video, please like it. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you tune in again soon.